Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to Rwanda.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating one.
I think so.
So we're looking at Rwanda's economic landscape,
Uh-huh.
and we've got this World Bank economic memorandum to guide us.
It's a good one.
It is, yeah. And honestly, some of the stuff in here is pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah, I was surprised by a lot of it, too.
For example,
Well, for example,
get this. Rwanda's economy,
it's doing well.
it's doing really well.
Yeah.
It's actually outperforming almost all other African nations
Wow.
since its recovery from the 1994 genocide.
Yeah, it's a remarkable turnaround.
It really is. Only Ethiopia is really even coming close.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and here's the really surprising part.
Okay, lay it on me.
It's not manufacturing that's driving this growth.
Oh,
It's the service sector.
really? The service sector?
Yeah. Isn't that fascinating?
It really is. That kind of flips the traditional development playbook on its head, doesn't it?
It does. You usually expect manufacturing to be the engine for growth, especially in developing economies.
Right, exactly.
But Rwanda's proving that you don't always have to follow the same old path.
And you know what else makes Rwanda's case so interesting?
What's that?
Their potential to become a regional logistics hub.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Think about it. Rwanda, this landlocked country,
Right.
could actually become a linchpin of trade for the whole region.
Wow, that would be incredible.
It would supercharge their economy, that's for sure.
So I'm already seeing how this deep dive is going to challenge some of my assumptions.
Mine too.
But let's back up for a second to just get some context.
Yeah, good idea.
Just how impressive has Rwanda's growth been since the genocide?
Well,
Paint us a picture.
their GDP per capita growth has been consistently strong,
Okay.
but, we need to look beyond just the numbers.
Right. Get a little deeper.
Yeah, understand what's actually driving this growth.
Right.
And a huge factor has been investment,
Right.
particularly in sectors like industry and services.
Okay.
And this isn't just, abstract investment.
Yes,
It's
yeah.
translated into real improvements in living standards for people.
That's what you want to see.
Exactly.
It's great when those numbers actually reflect positive changes
Right.
for people on the ground.
Absolutely. And we've also seen a pretty dramatic reduction in poverty.
Oh, wow. So it's making a real difference in people's lives.
That's the goal.
Absolutely. So it's not just about economic indicators going up. It's about actual positive change.
Yeah, that's the key.
So what specific industries are we talking about here? Is there anything surprising in the breakdown of where this growth is coming from?
Well, the fact that the service sector is leading the charge is pretty noteworthy.
Yeah, that was a surprise for me, too, when I first dug into the report.
Right. I mean, typically you'd expect manufacturing to be the main driver,
Yeah.
especially in a developing economy.
Right. It's kind of the classic story, isn't it?
It is, but in Rwanda, it's different areas like ICT. Trade and transportation, those are booming.
So those are really the areas that are propelling Rwanda forward.
It seems that way, yeah.
That's pretty fascinating. And how about the other sectors?
Oh.
The memorandum mentions industry and agriculture, too, right?
Yes,
What's
definitely.
going on with those?
Well, industry,
Okay.
particularly construction,
Yeah.
that's been another big contributor to Rwanda's economic boom.
Oh, so they're building a lot of new infrastructure, I guess.
It seems like it, yeah.
That makes sense.
Makes sense with the logistics hub idea, too.
Right, exactly.
As for agriculture,
Oh.
while its growth might seem less dramatic compared to the other sectors,
Okay.
it's still substantial.
Right.
And, we have to remember,
Yeah.
agriculture is still the backbone of Rwanda's economy.
Of course, yeah.
It employs a huge percentage of the population.
Right.
So it's definitely still crucial.
Absolutely, yeah. So it sounds like all cylinders are firing.
They are.
But I'm guessing the memorandum doesn't just paint a rosy picture. There have to be some cautionary notes in there, too.
There are.
What about the potential downsides of this rapid growth?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Are there any red flags that pop up?
Yeah, so one thing the memorandum points out is Rwanda's reliance on tourism infrastructure.
Interesting.
It plays a significant role in their macroeconomic stability,
Okay.
and it's a big source of foreign exchange for them.
Right.
But this reliance also makes them vulnerable
Oh.
to global shocks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, think about the recent pandemic.
Oh, of course.
What happened when global travel came to a screeching halt?
Yeah, not good.
Especially for countries that depend on tourism.
Exactly. Tourism-dependent economies were hit really hard.
Yeah, they were.
Did the memorandum talk about how Rwanda handled that crisis?
It did, yeah.
What did they say?
Well, so the pandemic definitely dealt them a blow.
Okay.
It actually pushed Rwanda into its first economic contraction
Oh, wow.
since 1994.
So their first time experiencing negative growth in decades.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
Wow.
The tourism sector naturally took a massive hit.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
But, and this is the interesting part,
Okay, tell me.
they were pretty quick to implement this plan,
What thing?
the Rwanda Economic Recovery Plan,
Okay.
or RERP.
RERP, gotcha.
And while it did increase their debt,
Okay.
it seems like it was a necessary move to cushion the impact.
So a calculated risk
Right.
to prevent an even deeper downturn.
Exactly.
It makes sense.
Yeah, they had to act fast.
Okay, so we've got this impressive growth,
Right.
but with some inherent vulnerabilities.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Now, I understand the memorandum goes deeper than just those macro trends.
It does, yeah.
It actually looks at the challenges faced by individual businesses.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me about that.
Okay, so the report really examines the private sector
Go.
and the specific hurdles faced by firms in Rwanda.
All right, so what kinds of hurdles are we talking about?
Well, imagine you're a business owner there.
Okay.
You're likely grappling with
Have you-
limited access to finance.
Ah, that's a big one.
It is, yeah.
Especially for smaller businesses, I imagine.
Right, and then there are high taxes.
Ooh, that's never fun.
Oop.
And what else?
Oh, and a shortage of skilled workers.
Yeah, that's a common problem in a lot of places.
It is. It's a tough one.
So even with all this impressive economic growth,
Yeah.
it's not all smooth sailing for those on the ground.
No, not at all.
It sounds like they're facing some pretty significant obstacles.
They are.
And are these constraints felt pretty evenly across the board?
Well,
Or are some businesses hit harder than others?
these constraints are especially acute
Okay.
for your micro, small, and medium enterprises.
Like your MSMEs,
Exactly, MSMEs.
they make up a big chunk of businesses.
The bulk, yeah.
The bulk of the businesses in Rwanda.
Right.
But they often struggle to access the resources they need.
Yeah, they're the ones that are really feeling the squeeze.
That sounds like a major roadblock to growth.
It is. It is.
Does the memorandum offer any insights into why these MSMEs are having such a tough time?
It does, yeah.
Particularly with financing.
Especially with financing.
Is there anything that sheds light on that?
So this is where the role of state-owned enterprises, or
Okay.
SOEs,
OEs.
comes into play.
Okay, interesting. How so?
Well, the report suggests that SOEs
Okay.
might actually be hindering private sector growth.
Oh, wow. That's unexpected.
Yeah, a bit counterintuitive.
Especially when you consider,
Yeah,
government efforts to attract foreign direct investment
right.
and privatize some of those SOEs.
Right, exactly.
It seems like it would be the opposite.
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But think about it.
Okay.
SOEs often have preferential access to resources,
Oh, I see.
which makes it even harder for smaller businesses to compete.
So they're kind of crowding out the smaller players.
Yeah, in a way.
It's almost like an unintended consequence
Right, exactly.
of having these SOEs still in the mix.
It adds another layer of complexity
Yeah, it definitely does.
to Rwanda's success story.
It's not as straightforward as it might seem at first glance.
Not at all.
So if access to financing is so limited,
Yeah,
how are businesses even getting started?
that's a great question.
Where's the seed money coming from?
Well, that's a key issue that the memorandum highlights.
Okay, what's the issue?
Domestic savings in Rwanda are low.
Okay, so there's just not a lot of capital floating around to begin with.
Right, and to make matters worse,
Oh.
only a tiny fraction of those savings actually go through formal financial institutions.
So it's not even easily accessible.
Exactly, it's a double whammy.
Wow, so not only are there limited savings, but accessing what is there is also a huge challenge.
It's a tough environment for Rwandan firms,
Sounds like it, yeah.
especially the smaller ones.
Right, they're really up against it.
They are.
But what about the bigger picture?
Okay.
How is Rwanda competing globally? Where does international trade fit into all of this?
That's a great question, and it leads us to another crucial aspect of the memorandum.
Okay, I'm all ears.
It's all about trade.
All right, let's talk trade.
So the memorandum really emphasizes Rwanda's strategy to use trade,
Okay.
not just for economic growth,
Right.
but also to reduce their dependence on things like foreign aid and remittances.
So basically trying to forge a more independent path
Exactly.
through trade.
Right. Self-reliance through trade.
Smart.
I think so.
But how are they actually doing in the global marketplace?
Right.
What's the state of Rwanda's export sector?
Their exports, both goods and services,
Okay.
have generally been on an upward trend.
That's good.
It is, yeah.
So they're making progress.
Right, are.
But I'm guessing the pandemic probably threw a wrench in things.
Of course.
Did that cause a dip?
Yeah, it caused a significant dip.
Okay,
They're recovering,
that's good.
but it's slow.
Okay.
And it really raises the question
Ah.
of whether they can actually reach those ambitious goals they've set for themselves.
Ambitious is good, right?
It is. You got to aim high.
I mean, you don't get anywhere without setting your sights high.
Exactly.
But what's holding them back?
What's preventing them from reaching their full potential?
Yeah, what are those roadblocks in the export market?
There are a few key ones that the memorandum points out.
Okay, Emma.
High input costs are a big one,
Right, makes sense.
especially for transportation and tariffs.
Yeah, those can really eat into your profits.
They can, and it makes it harder for Rwandan businesses to compete on price.
Right, when your costs are higher, it's tough to offer competitive prices.
Exactly.
What else?
Then there's the issue of limited product diversification.
So they're relying on the narrow range of exports.
Right, which makes them vulnerable
Vulnerable to what?
to fluctuations in global demand.
Oh, I see.
So if demand for one of their key exports drops,
Yeah.
their whole economy could feel it.
Ouch. So it's like putting all your eggs in one basket.
Kind of, yeah.
I guess diversifying what they offer would help to spread the risk a bit.
It would.
Anything else hampering their export ambitions?
Yeah, the memorandum also highlights complex regulations as an obstacle.
Bureaucracy. It's
Exactly.
the enemy of efficiency, isn't it?
It often is, unfortunately.
So what are they recommending?
They suggest streamlining those regulations,
Makes sense.
making them more business-friendly.
Right. Cut the red tape.
Exactly, and that could really boost export growth.
Less bureaucracy, more trade.
It's a winning formula.
It really is.
But
Indeed.
even with diversified exports and streamlined regulations,
Yeah.
don't you need the right people?
Of course. The human element
Exactly.
to make it all work.
You need a skilled workforce.
Absolutely. So what does the memorandum say about Rwanda's workforce?
It really stresses the importance of skills development,
Okay.
especially in the digital realm.
Right, because the world is becoming increasingly digital.
It is.
So they need to keep pace.
Yeah, if they want to succeed in this,
Yeah.
increasingly digital and service-oriented global economy,
Right.
they need to invest in their people.
It all comes back to human capital, doesn't it?
It really does.
Investing in education and training seems absolutely critical.
It's essential for long-term sustainable growth.
Absolutely. But while they're working on that long-term skills development,
Yeah.
they've got some more immediate issues to address too,
Like what?
like poverty and inequality.
Right.
How does the memorandum tackle that side of things?
You're right to connect those dots.
Because economic growth that leaves people behind isn't really progress, is it?
Exactly, and that's what's interesting. The
Okay.
memorandum paints this nuanced picture.
Okay.
On the one hand, there's no denying that structural transformation in Rwanda.
And by structural transformation, you mean?
Yeah, so I'm talking about the shift in employment from agriculture to industry and services.
Okay, gotcha.
So that structural transformation has led to job creation and a decrease in poverty.
That's the good news.
That's the good news, but
There's a but.
there's a but. The benefits haven't been evenly spread.
So some groups are being left behind.
Exactly. Some groups,
Okay.
particularly those still reliant on agriculture and informal sectors,
Right.
they haven't seen the same level of improvement.
So some are being lifted by the rising tide, but others are struggling to stay afloat.
That's a good way to put it.
It seems like targeted interventions would be key here.
Yeah, they're crucial.
Does the memorandum offer any specific strategies for addressing these disparities?
It does, and this is where it gets into the specifics of policy.
Okay, let's hear it.
So, for example,
Yeah.
they highlight the role of social safety nets. Things like cash transfers or food assistance programs.
Right.
These can help to mitigate the impact
The impact of what?
of those economic shocks.
Right, things that can really destabilize people's livelihoods.
Exactly.
And what kinds of shocks are we talking about specifically?
Well, climate change is a big one.
Oh, of course, yeah.
That can have a huge impact on vulnerable populations.
Absolutely. So these programs help to provide a bit of a buffer.
Yeah, a safety net.
A safety net, exactly.
And the report strongly suggests that Rwanda needs to both expand the reach of these programs,
Reach them more people.
reach more people, exactly, and improve the financing of these programs.
Okay, so more robust programs overall.
That's the idea.
So it's about creating a safety net to catch those who might otherwise fall through the cracks.
Right.
But safety nets are just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
For long-term sustainable development.
Yeah.
You need a thriving agricultural sector, right?
Absolutely.
Especially in a country like Rwanda, where agriculture is still such a major employer.
Exactly. You can't ignore agriculture.
Right. It's still the foundation of the economy.
And the memorandum really digs into this.
Okay, what do they say?
They recognize the importance of agriculture
Okay.
for both economic transformation
Okay.
and food security.
Right. You need to be able to feed your own people.
You do.
So what are they saying about boosting agricultural productivity?
They emphasize that it's key. It's a key driver for overall development
Right.
because it can lead to higher incomes,
Okay.
more efficient labor allocation,
Okay.
and just overall economic growth.
So it's really about making the agricultural sector more efficient and productive.
That's the goal.
But I imagine there are challenges
Of course.
specific to Rwanda's context.
Right.
What are some of the hurdles they're facing when it comes to agriculture?
Well, the memorandum points to a few key issues.
All right, let's hear them.
Land misallocation is one.
Okay, so making sure land is being used effectively,
Exactly. Efficiently and productively.
getting the most out of the land they have.
What else? Then there's the issue of low productivity.
So they're not getting as much output
Right.
as they could be.
And that's often linked to
What?
limited adoption of new technologies and farming practices.
So they're kind of stuck in the old ways of doing things.
In some cases, yeah.
And that's holding them back.
It is.
Okay, what else?
And of course, you can't forget about climate change.
Oh, right.
That's a looming threat,
Yeah.
adding a whole layer of uncertainty
Right.
and risk.
To the agricultural sector.
Agriculture, yeah.
Those are some tough challenges.
They are, no doubt about it.
It sounds almost overwhelming.
It's a lot to deal with.
But I'm hoping there are some bright spots,
Oh, there are.
some success stories that the memorandum highlights.
Yeah, definitely.
What are some of the positive they point to?
So, for example, they point to the success of irrigation programs.
Okay, so that's helping.
It's helping to boost yields and incomes,
That's great.
especially for smallholder farmers.
What's who you want to target, right?
Exactly.
Those who are most vulnerable.
Right.
Okay.
They also advocate for a transition to a more knowledge-based agri-food sector,
Okay, interesting.
leveraging private sector investment in research and development.
So bringing in new ideas and new approaches
Yeah, exactly.
to really transform the agricultural sector.
Right. It's about modernization and innovation.
So a combination of smart policy
Yes.
and strategic investment
Yes.
to really kind of catapult the agricultural sector forward.
That's the idea.
It seems like Rwanda's facing this multi-layered challenge
Yes.
of boosting agricultural output
Mm-hmm.
while also adapting to a changing climate.
Right. It's a two-pronged approach.
Speaking of which,
Okay.
how does the memorandum address the elephant in the room, climate change?
They dedicate a whole section to it.
They do. Okay, good.
Yeah, it's a big focus.
What do they say?
They talk about the impact of climate change on Rwanda's economy
Right.
and the urgent need for climate financing to build resilience.
Climate change is a global issue,
It is.
but as we've seen, it often hits developing nations the hardest.
It does, yeah.
What's Rwanda's approach to tackling this challenge?
Well, they've made commitments to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions
Okay.
and adapt to the impacts of climate change.
All right. So they're taking it seriously.
They are, and these are called nationally determined contributions,
Oh.
or NDCs.
NDCs. Gotcha.
The problem is,
Ah.
as the memorandum points out,
Yeah.
meeting these commitments is expensive.
That's often the case, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a real challenge.
Essential, but expensive.
Exactly.
So what solutions does the memorandum propose for financing these climate actions?
They explore a few different avenues.
Okay.
One option is mobilizing climate finance through innovative debt and non-debt instruments.
Okay, so looking for creative ways to fund these initiatives.
Exactly.
Why?
They also suggest redirecting existing funds towards more climate-friendly projects.
So basically, shifting priorities within the budget.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
And incentivizing private sector involvement.
Getting businesses on board in
Exactly.
those emission reduction efforts.
Yeah, a multi-pronged approach.
So a mix of external financing and internal realignment of resources.
Yeah, that's a good way to sum it up.
It sounds like a complex juggling act.
It is. There are a lot of moving parts.
But let's say they manage to secure the financing
Okay.
and implement these climate resilient measures.
Mm-hmm.
Can they actually sustain all of this?
That's the big question.
Can they afford it in the long run?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
And it brings us to another really crucial aspect that the memorandum covers.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's the challenge of fiscal space
Okay.
and the need for sustainable growth.
Right, because you don't want to mortgage your future
Exactly.
just to address the immediate challenges.
Right.
So what are they saying about Rwanda's fiscal situation?
Well, they highlight rising public debt as a major concern.
Uh-oh, that's never a good sign.
No, it's not ideal.
So what do they recommend for ensuring that Rwanda's economic success doesn't come at the cost of its long-term financial health?
Yeah, so they emphasize fiscal consolidation.
Okay, so tightening the belt a bit.
Right, but
Yeah.
without stifling economic growth.
Right, so it's a balancing act.
It is a delicate balance.
I imagine that's tricky.
It's a tough one.
What specific measures do they propose for achieving that balance?
They suggest things like improving public investment management.
Okay, so making sure that money is being spent wisely.
Exactly, particularly in infrastructure projects.
Right, because there's often a lot of waste in those big projects.
There can be, yeah.
What else?
They also point to the need for scrutinizing the role of SOEs.
Ah, those state-owned enterprises again.
Yeah, they're back.
Okay, and what are they saying about them this time?
Well, they're talking about potentially privatizing some of them.
Okay, so getting the government out of certain businesses.
Right, to free up resources.
So it's about tightening the belt, but strategically,
Yes.
to ensure that they can continue investing
Mm-hmm.
where it's most needed.
Right, making those tough choices.
I'm seeing a theme here.
What's that?
It's all about finding that sweet spot.
It's a balance between competing priorities.
Right, it's a constant balancing act.
Exactly.
But,
Yeah.
beyond those kind of immediate fiscal concerns,
Yep.
what about the broader vision?
Yeah, the long-term vision.
Right, for Rwanda's economic future.
Exactly.
What are the key takeaways
Yeah.
that the memorandum offers for long-term sustainable development?
That's a great question, and one that I think will lead us nicely into our next segment.
Okay.
Because I think there are some really interesting insights in there
There are.
that can help us understand not just Rwanda's path,
Right.
but the broader challenges and
I've-
opportunities facing developing nations in the 21st century.
Yeah, it's a global story.
It is. It really is. But for now, we're going to take a quick break.
Sounds good.
And when we come back,
Yeah.
we'll delve
Wow.
deeper into those long-term strategies for sustainable development.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
All right, see you soon.
See you in a bit.
Well,
So where were we?
we were talking about Rwanda's economic outlook
Right.
and kind of the big picture challenges and opportunities.
Okay, yeah. And how they fit into the global landscape.
Exactly. And I think a good place to pick up is with those long-term strategies for sustainable development.
Makes sense.
What are some of the key takeaways from the memorandum in terms of how Rwanda can ensure that their growth is sustainable?
Well, one of the big themes that runs through the entire memorandum is this idea of strong leadership.
Okay, that makes sense.
They really emphasize the importance of having a clear vision
Right.
and the commitment to actually implement the necessary reforms.
Because a vision without action is just a daydream. You
Exactly.
need both
They need both.
to make real progress.
And they also stress the importance of learning from past experiences,
Okay.
both the successes and the mistakes.
So kind of constantly evaluating and adapting.
Right, being flexible and responsive to changing circumstances,
Makes sense. And what about the practical side of things?
like in terms of resources.
Yeah, like what do they need to actually put these strategies into action?
Well, they definitely highlight the need for dedicated resources.
Okay, so sufficient funding.
Yeah, enough money to actually make these things happen.
Right.
But it's not just about throwing money at the problem.
Of course not.
It's about strategic investment.
Right, investing in the right areas.
Yeah,
Where
exactly.
they'll have the biggest impact.
And they also talk about the importance of multi-year targets.
Okay.
So thinking beyond just short-term gains.
Right, having a long-term perspective.
Yeah, and setting goals that will guide their development over the coming years.
That's a smart approach.
Yeah.
And what about the human element?
The workforce.
Yeah, because we talked earlier about the skills gap.
Right, right.
How does that factor into their long-term strategies?
So they specifically mention the need to address human skill gaps.
Okay.
And they talk about integrating fiscal reforms
Okay.
within a comprehensive framework.
So it's not just about fixing the budget.
Yeah.
It's about addressing the underlying issues.
Right, tackling those systemic challenges that are contributing to these imbalances.
So it's a holistic approach.
It is. It's about looking at the big picture and connecting all the dots.
It sounds like they got a pretty solid plan in place.
They do, but of course,
But of course,
the real test is in the implementation.
right, it's one thing to have a plan on paper.
Yeah.
It's another thing to actually make it a reality.
Exactly. And that's where those factors we talked about earlier.
Like leadership and commitment.
Exactly. That's where those really come into play.
Because you can have the best plan in the world,
Right.
but if you don't have the will to see it through,
it's not going to amount to much.
It's going to fizzle out.
Right. It'll just be another report on a shelf.
Gathering
Dust.
So what you're saying is Rwanda has a lot of potential.
They do.
They've got this ambitious vision for their future.
They do.
But whether they can achieve it
Right.
really depends on their ability to execute, on their ability to translate those plans into tangible action.
And that's going to require sustained effort
Yeah,
and a willingness to adapt and adjust along the way.
because the world is constantly changing.
It is, and Rwanda's going to have to stay nimble to keep up.
Well said. I think this deep dive has been incredibly insightful.
I think so too.
It's really given us a glimpse into the complexities of development.
Right. It's not a simple process,
Not at all.
and there are no easy answers.
Definitely not.
But Rwanda's story is
Yeah.
a powerful reminder
Of what?
that even in the face of incredible challenges,
Okay.
progress is possible.
That's a good message to end on.
It is. It's a message of hope.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even in the most difficult circumstances, there's always a possibility for a brighter future.
There is, and that's something worth celebrating.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today,
We have.
and I want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure.
It's been a fascinating conversation,
I've enjoyed it.
and I hope our listeners have found it as insightful as I have.
I hope so too.
And as always, we encourage you to continue the conversation.
Yeah, keep those deep dives going.
Exactly. Do your own research, explore these topics further.
There's so much to learn out there.
There is. And we'll be back next time with another deep dive into a different corner of the world.
Until then, happy exploring.
See y'all next time.
So where were we?
We were about to unpack those key takeaways for Rwanda's long-term sustainable development.
Right.
It feels like we've covered so much ground already.
We have, from their impressive economic growth to those challenges with poverty and inequality.
We dove deep into the hurdles faced by businesses that push for international trade and, of course, climate change.
Oh, and the need for sustainable public finances.
It's a lot to process, but it's been fascinating. What stands out to you? What was the most surprising thing you learned from this World Bank report?
You know, what really struck me is how Rwanda's story kind of challenges our preconceived notions about economic development. We often think of it as being driven by industry, by manufacturing.
Right, that's the classic model.
Exactly. But Rwanda's success is, largely fueled by the service sector.
It really flips the script.
It does.
Right.
And it raises so many interesting questions.
Like what? What are you thinking?
Well, could this signal a broader shift? Could we see other developing nations taking a page from Rwanda's playbook?
Prioritizing service-driven growth.
Exactly. Maybe this is a sign of a new development paradigm emerging,
Yeah.
One where services take center stage.
That's a really interesting thought. And it's what I love about these deep dives. We don't just passively absorb information. We start to see those connections.
The bigger picture.
Yeah, those potential implications.
And then, of course, we get to throw back to you, the listener.
What are your takeaways from this conversation? What surprised you? What are you grappling with?
What stands out?
Because that's where the real learning happens, right?
Absolutely. When you take this knowledge and apply it to your own understanding of the world.
We've explored so much. Their efforts to attract foreign direct investment, those struggles with low domestic savings. We talked about the need for more skilled workers, that potential to become a regional logistics hub.
And, of course, the looming impact of climate change.
Right, we can't forget that. For me, the key takeaway is this. Rwanda's story is an inspiring testament to resilience and ambition. But it's also a powerful reminder that economic progress, no matter how impressive, is fragile.
It requires constant attention, smart policy choices.
And a willingness to learn from both the successes and the mistakes.
Perfectly put. And on that note, I'll leave you with this final thought. We've seen how Rwanda defied expectations, leveraging its service sector for growth. Could this be a sign of things to come? Could we be witnessing a shift in traditional development models?
It's a great question for all of us to consider as we continue to explore this ever-evolving global economy. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another fascinating exploration.
Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep those deep dives going.
See you all next time.